Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Tuition. In this tutorial, we are going to create PHP CRUD Operation. I've got many requests from my subscriber to create PHP CRUD Operation. So here it is. So in this tutorial, we're going to learn how to create PHP CRUD Operation with MySql database. I will show you a very simple technique to create, read, update and delete data from the database. This tutorial is for beginners, so I'm not going to add any advanced topic like ajax and object patterns in this video. So I specially made this video for beginners to understand the CRUD operation. So let's see what we are going to build in this tutorial. So as you can see, I have here bookstore application. In this bookstore application, I want to add books in my database. So here the ID of my book, the name of my book, the publisher and the price. So I want to add my first book in my database. To add the first book, I'm going to just click on this book name text box and just specify PHP here, because I want to first add the PHP book here. And suppose the name of my publisher is daily, so I'm going to say here daily, and the price is $59.99, right? Now to create this record, I'm going to just click on this create button. When I click on this create button, you're going to get a message here, record successfully inserted, and when you refresh your database, you're going to see this record right here, right? So this is your first record. To insert your next record, I'm going to just say here MySql, specify the publisher name, so I'll just say here SQL, and the price is going to be $49.99, right? To insert this record, just click on this create button. When you refresh your database by clicking on this read button, you are going to get two records in your database, right? Now let's say you want to update this first record and just change this publisher to PHP publisher. For that, you just need to click on this edit button. So when you click on this edit button, you are going to get these values in these text boxes. So I need to just change this daily to PHP publisher, right? To update this value, just click on this update button. So when I click on this update button, you can see this message, data successfully updated. And when you refresh your database, you have this updated value. Now, just after that, let me show you how to delete data. Now let's say I want to delete this second record. To delete this second record, I'm going to just click on this edit button. So when I have this second record in these text boxes, I'm going to just click on this delete button. So when I click on this delete button, the second record is deleted and you can see a message, record deleted successfully. And when you refresh your database, you are going to get only one record. And if you try to insert your next record like this, so I'm going to just say here JavaScript, and the publisher is going to be JavaScript action, and the price is $35.99. And when you insert this record in the database, you are going to get this message, record successfully inserted. And when you refresh your database, you can see you have these one and third value because we already deleted my second value. Now let me show you how you can delete all record at once. So as you can see, we have only 4 buttons up here. If I create more than 3 record, I will get delete all button right here. So if I just duplicate this record and create a new record, and if I create one more record by clicking on this create button, I'm going to create delete all button right here. So when I click on this create button, you can see I have here delete all button because I have more than 3 values, right? So when you have more than 3 values, you can see we have this delete all button to delete all these records. What I want to delete all these records at once. So when I click on this delete all button, this is going to delete all this record. Let me show you how. If I click on this delete all button, this will delete all these records and you can see all record deleted successfully. And if you refresh your database, you can see you don't have anything and you can see the ID 1 here. Because you don't have anything, so you're going to insert your first value now. Now let's see how to create this beautiful CRUD operation with PHP and MySql database, and I will show you the step-by-step process to create this beautiful CRUD operation. So what are you waiting for? So before we getting late, let's get started. Now let's get started and understand how to create this PHP CRUD operation with MySql database. Let me first inform you that this is only a beginner tutorial to understand how to create this CRUD operation. If you're thinking that I'm going to insert ajax and object patterns in this tutorial, then this is not going to happen in this tutorial. This tutorial is only for beginners to understand how to create CRUD operation with just the PHP functions. So let's get started and understand how to create that. Now to work with PHP, you need to first install the web server. So I'm going to use the XAMPP web server to work with PHP. If you want, you can use any other web server as well, just like WAMP server or EasyPHP and so on. but I'm going to use the exam server because it's very lightweight and easy to use. So I'm going to just open the exam control panel. I already installed this exam web server on my local system. If you don't have this web server, just open your browser and search for exam, and just after that just click on this first website. Now from this website you can download this exam web server for your local system. You can download this web server for Windows, Mac OS and Linux as well, right? I'm going to use this exam server for Windows, so I'm going to install this exam server from this link, right? So I'm going to just click here to install PHP 7.3. I'm not going to download this exam server because I already have this exam server installed in my local system. Once you download this application, just install this by clicking on the exe file and just press next, next and just finish the process, right? Once you install this application, just open it and you can see this type of control panel. Now to start this Apache server, you can just click on the start button, and to start the MySql database, just click on this start button. So I'm going to just click on the start buttons to start this server. So as you can see, the server is started. Now I'm going to just minimize this server and just open my C drive. Once you install this application, you can find this exam folder. In this folder, just go to htdoc folder. Now in this folder, you should put your website related stuff for each website you create. It's better to create a folder inside htdoc folder and then put content inside that to avoid conflicts. For example, you can create a tutorial folder inside this htdoc folder to put your CRUD operation, right? As you can see, I already have this tutorial folder, and in this folder I don't have anything, right? Now I'm going to open this folder in PHPStorm. So I'm going to just open the PHPStorm IDE. Now if you want, you can use any other IDE like VS Code, NetBeans and so on. But when I work with PHP, I love to use PHPStorm IDE. So I'm going to use this PHPStorm IDE for this tutorial. So in this IDE, as you can see, we have this tutorial folder. Now in the PHPStorm IDE, just click on this file and select new project and just open this tutorial folder created in the htdoc folder, right? Now in this folder, I'm going to create a new project. So I'm going to just right click here and say new directory and name this directory CRUD and just press enter. Now this will create a new folder CRUD here. Now in this CRUD folder, I'm going to just first create index.php file. So I'm going to just select the PHP file and just specify file name index.php, right? The file name extension is here, so you don't need to specify the .php extension right here. So I'm going to just specify the name of my file here and just press OK. Now as you can see, we have this index.php file here, and in this file I'm going to just say echo and just print welcome PHP, right? Save the file. And now just open the browser, and to know your exam server is running or not, just type here localhost and just press enter, right? So you have these exam server details. So as you can see, we have PHP 7.3 version installed in our system with this exam server. Now once you install this exam server, you can use Apache, MySql Database, PHP and other programming languages. Now just after that, to execute your index.php file, just say here localhost / tutorial, the name of your folder created in the htdoc folder, and then specify your project directory name. So the name of my project directory is CRUD. So I'm going to just say here CRUD and then specify the file name. So I'm going to say here index.php. Once you press enter, you can see we have this welcome PHP text here, right? Now let's get started and create this amazing CRUD operation. Now I'm going to first design the application and then work with PHP and MySql database, right? So I'm going to just create of this statement and just enter here an exclamation mark and press tab, right? So you have this simple HTML5 snippet here, and I'm going to just change this title and change this title to books. Now just after that, now in this project I'm going to get the help from Bootstrap to glorify this template and also use font awesome icons to use icons in this project. So I'm going to just open the browser and search for Bootstrap, and from this first website, so I'm going to just click on this get started and use this CDN to link this Bootstrap library to my application. So I'm going to just paste this link here and this script, copy the script and just paste this just before this closing body tag right here. right? Now the Bootstrap library is linked with your application. Now you can work with Bootstrap. Now what I want to use icons in this project as well. So I'm going to just open this new tab and search for font awesome. And from this website, just click on the start using free. And as you can see, this is your CDN. So I'm going to just copy this and paste it just before this Bootstrap right here. Now you can use any free icons of Font Awesome website in this project, right? Just after that, I'm going to just create a custom style sheet here. So I'm going to just click on this project directory and just say new style.css file. So I'm going to just say here style sheet and just specify a name style.css. Now I'm going to just link this file to index.php. So I'm going to just create here a comment and say here custom style sheet, right? And just link this file, and in the href attribute I'm going to just specify style.css. Save the changes, and now just after that I'm going to just create here h1 heading tag to test this HTML file and specify welcome PHP. Save the changes, and when you reload your application you can see you have this welcome PHP heading tag, right? In the body section right here, I want to first create here a main tag. So I'm going to just say here main. So in this main tag, I want to create a division tag with the class container. So I'm going to just create here a division tag and specify a class container. Now, as you can see, we created this division tag and specify the class container. Instead of doing this, I want to show you the simple step to create this division tag with the class container. Just specify dot here and say container and press tab to create a division tag with the class container like this, right? Now once you have this container, I'm going to just create h1 heading tag and specify text book store, right? Save the changes, and as you can see we have this bookstore here. Now I want to add an icon here, so I'm going to just add I tag here and just specify a class fa swatch book, right? And when I save it, you can see here we have this icon right here, right? Now I want to center this text, so I'm going to just specify here text center class of Bootstrap. Save the changes, and you can see we have this text on the center of the document. Now just after that I want to add some padding, so I'm going to just add here a class to this h1 heading tag and specify padding y 4. Specify the dark background, so I'm going to just use the Bootstrap bg dark class, and just want to specify the light text color, so I'm going to just say here text light, and I want to round this corner, so I'm going to just say here rounded, right? Save the changes. Once you reload that, you can see this type of result, right? I'm going to add a space right here like this. And now just after this h1 heading tag right here, I'm going to just create here another division tag with the class deflect. So I'm going to just say here dot deflect. So this class will specify display flex property to this division tag, right? Now in this division tag I'm going to add a form. I'm going to specify this action attribute later in this tutorial. Just after that I'm going to specify here method post, and I want to specify a class width 50. So this is going to specify 50% width to this form. In this form, I'm going to create here a division tag with the padding y. I'm going to create a division tag with the class padding y 2. So this class will specify the top and bottom padding to this division tag, right? We use this class right here as well to specify top and bottom padding. Now in this division tag, I want to create a Bootstrap input tag like this. I want to create this Bootstrap input tag right here. So I'm going to just copy this code from here and just copy this and paste it right here. Save the changes, and when you reload your page, as you can see, you have this input tag right here. Now I want to center this text box, so I'm going to just specify here to this division tag justify content center. So this will center this text box. Save the changes and reload it, right? Now just after that I want to change this @ sign and this placeholder. So I'm going to just get rid of this @ sign and use icon here. Now here I want to add an icon. If you never worked with Font Awesome website, then it's very simple. Just open the Font Awesome website and click on these icons. Right here, just search for your icon. So I'm going to just say here ID. So I'm going to select this ID icon. Now just after that, just copy this HTML tag and place it wherever you want in this HTML file. So I'm going to just place it right here. Right? Save the changes, and when you reload it, you can see you have this icon right here. Now I want to add some Bootstrap classes to change this text box. Now what I want to change this background color. So I'm going to specify a class to this division tag and say bg warning. So this is going to change this background color, right? Now just after that, for this input tag, I'm going to just specify autocomplete off. And just after that, I'm going to specify the placeholder, and here I'm going to specify ID. Save the changes, and when you reload it, you can see you have this ID placeholder here, right? Now let's create a few more text boxes right here. Now just after that, I'm going to add another text box where we add the book name. So I'm going to just click on this. I'm going to create a division tag with the class padding top 2. Right? Now in this division tag, I'm going to create the same text box. So I'm going to just copy this code and paste it here. If you're using a simple HTML, then you need to use this code again and again to create your template. But you know that we are using PHP. So instead of copying this code again and again, I can use a function to create this template. Like this. If I just copy this text and just get rid of this text from here and create a new file. So I'm going to just create a new directory here and name this directory PHP. In this directory, I'm going to create a new file, PHP file, and just specify a PHP file name component. Now let me show you how you can create this text box using a function. So I'm going to create here a function and name this function input element. In this function, I'm going to just create a new variable. So to create a variable, you can use the $sign and specify the variable name. So I'm going to just specify element here and specify equal sign, and in the double quote I'm going to just paste this HTML code right here, right? Specify here a semicolon and just say echo element and just call this function in this index.php file. You can see this input text box right here like this. If I just open the index.php file and just include this component.php file up here, so I'm going to just call here PHP and just close this up, and I'm going to just include this component.php file using require once. So I'm going to just say here require once. So this function will include this file if the file is not exist, right? Now in this function, I'm going to just specify double quote, double dot, the forward slash, and then specify CRUD, the project name, then the PHP folder, and the component.php file, right? Just after that, I can use this function right here. So now if I add here a PHP syntax, and if I call here input element and save the changes and execute my application, you can see we have this ID right here as well. We have this duplicate input text boxes. We need to specify different placeholder here and the icon. For that, I'm going to open the component.php file, and instead of specifying the hard-coded values here, I'm going to just add here a parameter and just create a variable icon and just specify this icon variable right here instead of specifying this icon hard-coded value like this. So I'm going to just create another parameter here and create a variable placeholder and name this parameter placeholder, and I'm going to just specify this placeholder right here instead of specifying this placeholder hard-coded values. I'm going to just say here placeholder, right? Now just after that, I also want to specify a name attribute to this input text box. So I'm going to just create here another parameter name, and I'm going to specify this name attribute right here. Name is equal to name variable, right? Now just after that, I also want to specify value attribute to this text box. So we can specify values when we call this function. So I'm going to just specify a parameter value, and I can specify this value variable to the value attribute like this, right? Save the changes and just open the index.php file and specify arguments to this input element function. Now here I'm going to specify the first argument, so I'm going to just specify the double quote and specify here icon parameter. So I'm going to just specify the first argument icon, so I will add here I tag with the closing I tag and just specify a class fast fa book. Now just after that I will specify the second argument, which is placeholder. So I will name this placeholder book name, and then specify the third argument name. So I will specify here book underscore name, and the last I want to specify value to this input text box. So I don't want to specify any value to this text box, so I will leave this as it is. So I'm going to just specify the empty double quote here. Save the changes, and if you open your application and execute it, we have this book icon here and the book name placeholder. You can do the same with this first text box also, like this. If I just copy this statement and just get rid of this HTML division tag and paste this function again and change this icon to fast fa IDE batch, and the placeholder of the first text box is ID and the name of the first text box is book ID and the value is empty. When I save this and reload the page, you can see we have this text box using this function. So using this technique, you don't need to repeat yourself, right? So I'm going to just create two more text boxes right here. So I will just create here a division tag and specify class row. In this row, I will create a column class, and in the first column, I want to create here an input tag. So I'm going to just copy this statement, paste it here, and just change these argument values. So I'm going to just change this icon to people Gary. This placeholder name is became publisher. The name attribute of this input text box is book publisher, and I will leave this fourth argument as it is, right? Save the changes, and when you reload your application, you can see you have this publisher text box here. Now just after that, I'm going to create another column right here. So I'm going to just see here call and paste the function again, change the icon. So I will just use here $sign, then I will change the placeholder to price, and I want to change this name to book price and leave the last argument as it is. Save the changes, and when you reload it, you can see we have these two text boxes here. So you don't need to repeat yourself to create these text boxes, right? I'm going to add some padding, so I will just add here padding top 2. I want to remove some padding from the first text box, so I will just specify here padding top 2. Now just after that, I want to create here 4 buttons. Each button represents their own functionality. So we are going to create here create, read, update and delete button. So I'm going to just create here a division tag. Just out of this division tag right here, create here a division tag and specify a class deflect. In this deflect class, I'm going to create here a button with the text create, right? Save the changes, and you can see you have this button right here. Now what I don't want to create this button using HTML. Instead of creating this button using HTML tag, I will create a function like this input function and create these buttons. So I will just get rid of this text and just open the component.php file and create a new function right here. Now in this component.php file, I'm going to create a function and name this function button element, right? In this function, I'm going to create a button. So I'm going to just create a variable btn, and I want to specify an HTML tag here. So I'm going to just specify double quote, and right here I will create a button. So I'm going to just say here button and just close this button, right? Now to this button, I will first specify name attribute. I'm not going to specify the hard-coded values here. Instead of specifying the hard-coded values, I will specify a parameter here. I'm going to just create a parameter and just specify that parameter variables, right? So I'm going to just create here a first parameter btn id Then I will create here style class. Then I will say text. Then I will specify name, and the last I will specify attribute, right? So as you can see, we have 4 parameter values for this button function. So I'm going to just use these parameter values and specify 2 different attributes. So for this name attribute, I will specify this name attribute, right? Now just after that, I will specify a class to this button and specify the style class variable right here. So I'm going to just say here style class, right? Just after that, I will specify ID and specify this btn ID right here. And just after that, to specify text, I'm going to just use this parameter. So I'm going to just say here text, right? Now just after that, if you want to add any attribute to this button using this last parameter, so I'm going to just specify here in the single quote attribute, right? And just after that, specify semicolon and just say echo btn. Save this file and just open index.php file, and right here what I'm going to do is I'm going to just call this PHP function right here. So I will just say here button element, right? Now you know that the first parameter is button ID. So in the double quote I will say btn create. Then I will specify the second argument, which is style class. So I want to specify here btn success. So this is a Bootstrap class to specify light green color to this button, right? Just after that, I will specify text. I want to specify here create text. So I will say here create. I will specify name to this button. So I'm going to just specify name create, and I will leave this last attribute as it is and just end the statement using semicolon. And if you reload your page, you can see you have this button here with the light green color. Now as you can see, we use here create text. Instead of specifying this create text, I'm going to use an icon here. I'm going to just get rid of this text and add here an icon and specify class fast fa plus, right? Save the changes and you can see we have this plus sign here, right? Now just after that, when you have this icon, I'm going to specify the Bootstrap tooltip. So when you hover over your mouse or this button, you're going to see the text, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just specify the Bootstrap tooltip. For this parameter, I will just specify a Bootstrap tooltip. So I will just add here Bootstrap attributes. So I will say data toggle and just specify here tooltip, right? Now just after that, I will just say data placement bottom and title is going to be create, right? Save the changes, and when you hover your mouse over this button, you can see this create text, right? Now if you don't want to use this tooltip, then leave this parameter as it is. It doesn't matter, right? Now just after that, I want to create my next button, so I'm going to just copy this statement and paste it here. Instead of specifying the same value, I will just specify here id btn read. The success is going to be primary and the icon is sync, right? And just after that, for this name attribute, I will specify read, and for this tooltip, I will just specify here read. Save the changes, and when you reload your application, you have this read button. I will do the same, so I will just copy the statement, paste it here, and just change this btn ID. So I will just say btn update. Then just after that, here I will just get rid of this primary text and just specify light border, and the icon is going to be pen alt, right? And I will just change the name to update, and I will just change this tooltip to update, right? Save the changes, and if you reload your application, you can see you have this update button right here. Copy the statement, paste it here again for the last button, and just change this ID to btn delete. I will change this class as well, so I will say btn danger, and the icon is going to be fa trash alt, right? Just after that, I will change the name to delete, and this tooltip become delete. Save the changes, and when you reload it, we have this delete button here. Right? Now I will add some style to this button, so I'm going to just open the style sheet. So I will just open the style.css file, and right here I will first select the deflect class, and then I will select the button. So I will say button here. Now I want to specify here margin to this button, so I will say margin, and I want to specify here 1.5 em and 0.6 em margin. Then I will specify padding 0.5 em and 2.4 em. Save the changes. So when you reload your application, you can see you have your buttons with padding and margin. Right? Now just after that, I want to center these all buttons. So I'm going to just open index.php file, and right here, just after this deflect class, I will just say justify content center. So this will center all these buttons like this, right? Now just after that, to display database values, I'm going to create here a table. So I'm going to just create here, just after this division tag right here, I'm going to create here a table. So I'm going to just add a comment here, bootstrap table. Now here I will just add a division tag with the class deflects table data. Right? Now in this tab, I will add the table tag with the class table stripped table dark. Right? And in this table, I will first create table head. So I will just say table head and specify a class thead dark. Right? Now in this table head, I'm going to create a table headers. So I'm going to first create here table row and create a first table header. So I will just specify th tag and specify id. Just after that, I will add table head tag and specify book name. Then I will add publisher, book price, and the last I will just add the edit button. Right? So I will just add edit header here. Save the changes, and when you reload your page, you have this bootstrap table here. When we create this table, I want to specify some margin to this table. So I'm going to just open the style.css file, and in this file I will just first specify deflect class and specify the table. Now in this table I will just specify the margin. So I will just say here margin and specify 1 em and 10 em margin here. When I save it and reload this page, you can see we have this margin specified to this table. Now just after that, open the index.php file, and here I will specify some data. So I'm going to just specify some dummy data in this table data. Now here what I'm going to do is I will just first create a table body. So I will just say here table body and specify id t body, and in this t body I will specify some demo data. So I will just add here table row. So what I'm going to do is I will just add here table data and specify my first id. So I will just say here 1 table data and just specify the book name. So I will just say book name, then specify table data, and then specify the publisher name. So I will just specify my name of my channel. So I will just say daily tuition, and then I will just specify table data with the price. So I will just say here 44.99. Right? Save the changes, and when you reload it, you can see we have this data in this table. Now I will just specify an icon in this table. So I will just specify here an icon. So I will just add table data. So when you click on this icon, you can get the values in the text box. So when you click on this icon, you can get these values in the text boxes. So I will show you that after a few minutes, right? So now just after that, what I'm going to do is I will just add here an icon, insert here I tag, and specify class fastfa edit, and specify btn edit custom class. So we can change the style to this icon. Save the changes, and when you reload it, you can see you have this icon right here. Now I want to specify some style to this icon. So I will open my style.css file. I'm going to just select this icon. So what I'm going to do is I will just select this table and then select this btn edit, right? And then I will first specify the color. So I will just say color light salmon, and then I will just say cursor pointer. Save the changes, and when you reload it, you can see you have this light cinnamon color to this edit icon, and you have this cursor here. Now as you can see, our design is ready. Now the time is to create a new database in MySQL database, right? So I'm going to just open my exam server and just click on this MySQL admin right here. So once you click on that, you can see you have this new tab open in your browser, and in this tab you can see you have PHP admin. And here, as you can see, we have this MySQL database. Now here, what I want to create a new database. So I can click on this new and create my new database. But instead of creating a new database right here, I'm going to create that using a PHP script. But what is the benefit to create this database using PHP script? So when you clone this application, you don't need to create that database manually and create a new table. Instead of creating a database manually, you just need to execute the application. This will automatically create a new database with a new table, right? So when you clone it, you don't need to create a new database. So that is why we are going to create a database using PHP script. So I'm going to just open my IDE, and right here in this IDE, I'm going to create a new file in this PHP folder. So I'm going to right click here and say new PHP file, right? And I'm going to name this file db, right? Now just after that, when I have this file, in this file I'm going to create a new function. Now in this file I'm going to create a function, so I will just say function create db, right? In this function I will first create the server name variable. So I will say server name is equal to localhost. Then I'm going to create a new variable and name this username. And now I will specify the username root. Now just after that, I'm going to create a new variable password and leave this as it is, because we did not set any password to my PHP admin. That is why we will leave this as it is. Just after that, I'm going to just create a db name variable and specify the database name right here. So I want to create bookstore. So I will just say here bookstore. Now I want to create a new connection with MySQL database. The MySQL connect function opens a new connection to MySQL server. So to create a new connection, I'm going to just create here a variable con and just specify equal to sign and call MySQLi connect. Now using this function, this function opens a new connection to MySQL server, and using this function you can connect your PHP script to MySQL database. Now the first argument is the host name. So I'm going to just pass this variable right here. The host name of my application is localhost. So I'm going to just say here server. So I'm going to pass this server name variable here because we have this localhost value in this variable. Just after that, I'm going to pass my second argument, which is the user. So I'm going to pass here username. Then the third argument is the password. So I'm going to pass here password variable. And the last, I have here a database. So I'm going to pass db name here, right? And just after that, I'm going to just specify semicolon to end this statement. Now I'm going to just create here a comment and say create connection. Now just after that, what I want to check that connection. So I'm going to just say here check connection. So I will just say here if the connection is not successful, then I want to die this application, and I will specify the error message connection failed, right? And then I will concatenate the error message. So I will say MySQLi connect error, right? And just after that, now if your application is not connect properly, then you're going to get this error message. Now just after that, I want to create a new database. So I'm going to just create a comment here and say create database. To create a new database, I'm going to first create a query. So I will just create a variable SQL and specify the MySQL query in the string. So I will just specify double quote and say create database if not exist, right? And specify the variable name right here. So I'm going to just pass here db name. So this statement will create a new database in your MySQLi database, right? Now to execute this command using PHP, you need to call MySQLi query. Now to execute this query, I'm going to just say here if MySQLi query. So I'm going to call this function. So this function perform a query against the database. So this function is going to execute this SQL query, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pass here the connection parameter first. So I'll just say here connection and then specify my SQL query. So I will just say here SQL. If this function is returned true, I'm going to just say here echo database created, right? And if this connection is not successful, then I'm going to just say here else statement and just say echo error while creating database. And along with that, I'm going to concatenate the error message. So I'm going to say MySQL error and just pass the connection parameter right here. Now just save it and just call this function in your index.php file right here. So I'm going to just call this function up here. So I'm going to just say here require once and just call the file right here, right? And just after that, I'm going to just call this function in this index.php file. So I will just say here create db, right? Save the changes and reload your application. When you try to connect your PHP to your MySQL database, you're going to get this error. In this error, you can see we have a no database bookstore. You're going to get this error because you don't have this bookstore database in your MySQL database, right? So that is why you are going to get this unknown database bookstore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just remove this fourth argument right from here, save the changes, and if you execute this application, you can see you have this database created message. And if you reload your database from here, you have this bookstore database. Now when you have this bookstore database, you can use that database in PHP. To use this database, I'm going to just copy this statement and paste it here instead of specifying this echo statement. So I will just get rid of this echo statement and specify the connection property here. And just after that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just specify here comma and specify my fourth argument, which is the database name. So I'm going to just specify here db name. Now if you wanted to inform MySQL which database you want to use, you need to specify this fourth argument. Now just after that, once I select this database, I want to create a new table here. So what I'm going to do is I will just create here a new query. So I will just say here SQL is equal to, and in the double quote I want to create SQL query. So I will just specify here create table and just specify if not exist, I want to create this table books, right? In this table I want to first create my first field, which is ID, and then I will specify the data type integer and the value is going to be 11, right? And then I will specify not null, and then I want to increase this ID by 1 automatically, right? So I want to start this ID from 1 and increase its value by 1. So I'm going to do this using auto increment, right? So I will just specify here auto increment. And to specify unique value to this ID, I'm going to specify primary key. So I will just say here primary key. Now just after that, I'm going to just specify my second field of this table. So I will just say here book name, and I want to specify varchar 25, right? And I'm going to just say here not null, right? And just after that, I will specify my third field, which is book publisher, and specify data type varchar 20. And the last, I want to specify book price. So I will just say here book price, and the data type is going to be float, right? Specify semicolon here, and just after that I will just execute this query using MySQL query function, right? So I'm going to just say here if MySQL query and then specify the first connection parameter. So I'm going to say here connection and then specify the executable query and then specify the SQL query. So I will just specify here SQL. Now if this function return true, I'm going to just say here echo table created, right? Or I'm going to just say in the else statement echo cannot create table, right? Save the changes and just specify semicolon here before you execute this statement. Save the changes, and when you reload your application, you can see you have this table created message right here. And if you take a look at this bookstore database, you can see you have this books table, right? This books table. In this table you have this ID, book name, book publisher, and this book price field. Now just after that, I don't want to echo any message. Instead of specifying this echo statement, I'm going to just return the connection, right? So when we, right? Now as you can see, in this file we just first created a new database and store that in the variable. We execute this query using MySql query. Just after that, once we have this database, I'm going to create a new table in that database. So we use SQL query to create a new database table. Just after that, I'm going to execute this query and create a new table and just return a connection from this function. Now, once we have this information, we're going to create CRUD operation, right? So I'm going to create a new file here. In the PHP folder, I'm going to say new PHP file and name this file operation, right? Now in this file, I'm going to first include the database file. So I will just say here require once, and right here I'm going to pass db.php file. And now just after that, I also want to include this component file. So I will just say here require once, and in the parentheses I'm going to just say component.php, right? Now once we have this file in this operation.php file, I can remove this file from here, right? I'm going to just open the operation.php file and right here, so I'm going to just call this function here, this one, right? So I'm going to just call this create db function here, and you know that this function is going to return a connection string. So I'm going to store that in the variable like this. Now once we have this connection string in this variable, I'm going to first insert data in my database using this create button. I'm going to just call a comment here and say create button click, right? And just after that, I will say here if is set. It means if we specify value to this button, I want to execute this if statement. So I will just specify an argument here to this is set function. So I will just say here post and just call in the single quote create. Now we're going to call this create button, this one, right? We specify name create to this button, right? When we click on this button, you can see this message echo, and I will say create button click. I'm going to just include this file in index.php. So I'm going to just include this file right here. So I will just say here require once and specify the path operation.php. Save the changes, and when you execute this file, and now when you execute this file and click on this create button, you're going to get this message create button clicked, right? Now just after that, open operation.php file, get rid of this echo statement and call a new function create data. We don't have this function yet, so I'm going to create this function right here. So I will just say here function create data, right? Now in this function, we are going to insert these text box values in the database table. Here in this function, I will first call the text box value. So I'm going to create here a variable book name is equal to, and just call post and just call this text box name. So I'm going to just say here book name, right? So this is the name of my text box. You can see here, right? Once we have these values, I want to validate these text box values and specify some security. For that, I'm going to create a new function here, function text box value, and just specify a parameter here value. Now in this function, I'm going to just create a variable text box and call MySql real escape string, right? I'm going to just call this function. So this function escape special characters in a string for use in SQL statement, right? Now in this function, the first argument is going to be a connection string. So I'm going to just pass this connection right here. Now if you just specify a connection here then you are going to get an error message because we don't have this variable in this function. To call this global function, you just need to get rid of this connection and just specify here $global, and in the bracket you can say connection, right? So you have this connection variable right here. Now just after that, I'm going to just specify here post. So I will just say here post and just call here this parameter value. Now before I execute this function, I need to provide a security against SQL injection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut this statement, this one, and just call trim function. In this trim function, I will just specify post value, right? So this will secure us from SQL injection. Just after that, once we have this value in this text box, I'm going to just check if the text box is empty and just specify the text box value here. So I will just say here text box. If this condition became true, I'm going to return false. Else, I will return the text box value. So I will just say here text box, right? Save the changes, and instead of specifying this post, I'm going to call this function, and in this parenthesis you don't need to call this post. Instead, you just need to specify the name of your text box. So I'm going to just say here book name, right? So we have this book name value in this book name variable. Now just after that, I'm going to create a new variable and name this book publisher and call this text box value function and specify book publisher name. I'm going to create a new variable here and name this book price and call this text box value function and just specify book price here, right? So now we have these text box values in these variables. Now once we have these values, I'm going to insert these values in the database. So I'm going to first check if we have values in these variables. So I'm going to just say if book name and book publisher and book price, then I'm going to just create here an SQL query. So now if we have data in the text boxes, I'm going to just execute this if statement, else I'm going to just execute this else statement, right? So what I'm going to do is, if we have data in these text boxes, I'm going to call SQL query. So I will just create here a query. So I will just say here SQL. I will create a variable, and in the double quote I'm going to just say insert into and specify your table name here. So I will just say here books, right? And then I want to specify values in the specific fields. So I will just specify here book name. The first field, we are not going to insert any value in the ID field because the ID field is auto incremented. So that is why we don't need to specify any value to the ID field, right? So we'll insert the values in the book name field. Then I will insert the values in book publisher field, and the last I will insert the values in book price field. And just after that, I want to specify values. So I will just call here values, and in the parentheses I'm going to call these values in the single quote. So I will call this single quote and just call book name, specify comma here, call the single quote, specify the second value for the publisher. So I will say book publisher, and then at the last I will call book price here, right? So we are going to insert these values in these fields, right? Now I want to execute this query, so I will just call if MySQL query and first call the connection string. So I will just call here global, and in the bracket I will call the connection, and the second argument is going to be SQL statement. So I will just say here SQL. Now if this function return true, I'm going to just say here echo record successfully inserted, right? And if anything goes wrong, I will just specify here else, and here I will just say error message, right? And in the else statement right here, if we did not specify any value in the text boxes, I'm going to print here echo provide data in the text box, right? Save the changes. So now when you click on this create button, you are going to get this message, provide data in the text box, right? So when I click on this button, you are going to get this message, provide data in the text box, because we didn't specify any data in these text boxes. Now what we are going to do is, I'm going to just insert a data in these text boxes. We don't need to specify ID to any product, right? Because we specify auto increment value to the ID, right? So we are going to first specify the book name. So I'll just say here book 1. The publisher is going to be publisher 1 and the price is going to be 35.99. When I click on this create button, the database record is created like this. If I click on this create button, you're going to get this message, record successfully created, right? And if you refresh this database, if you click on this bookstore and click on this table, you can see you have these values, book 1, publisher, and the book price. So now you can see we successfully inserted data in the database. But now instead of specifying this echo statement, I want to specify something unique. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just get rid of this echo statement, and instead of specifying this echo statement, I'm going to create here h6 heading tag. So to create this h6 heading tag, I'm going to just create here a function and say here messages, right? And I want to create here a function and name this function text node, right? Now in this function, I'm going to just create a variable element. In this variable, I want to store h6 heading tag. So I will just say here h6 heading tag and just close it. And I want to specify class, so I will say class here. And instead of specifying the hard-coded value here, I'm going to create here a parameter, class name, specify that parameter to this class attribute, like this, right? I'm going to just create here a parameter called msg and specify that right here, right? Specify semicolon here and just say echo element. And right here, instead of specifying the echo statement, I'm going to just call this function text node and first specify the class name. So I'm going to just say here success. So this is the name of my class, which we are going to create in the style.css file, and then the second value is going to be the message. So I will just specify here a message, provide data in the text box, right? Save the changes. When I reload this page and when I click on this create button, you're going to get this message. You're going to get this message using h6 heading tag. So we specify this success class to this h6 heading tag. So I'm going to just open my style.css file, and in this file I will just call this success class and just specify here background color light green, and then specify padding 1 em. Just after that, I'm going to create a new class here, error, and specify background color tomato and specify padding 1 em. So when you execute this, you're going to see this message with this beautiful background. Now you know that this is an error, so I'm going to specify this error class to this message. So I'm going to just open my operation.php file, and instead of specifying this success class, I will just say here error. Save the changes, and when you reload your file, you're going to get this error message. Instead of specifying this record successfully inserted message, I will just copy this statement, call this text node function right here, cut this text, record successfully inserted, and just get rid of this text and just specify here record successfully inserted, right? And just after that, I'm going to just change this error to success, right? Save the changes, and when you insert your value, and now if I try to insert my next value like this, if I just say here book 2, publisher 2, and the value is going to be 33.99, and if I click on this create button, we're going to get this message, record successfully inserted. And if you refresh your database, you're going to get this value, book 2, publisher 2, and the book price, right? Now you know that how to create data in MySQL database. Let's see how to get that data and display that data in this table. Right? Now to get the data from the database, I'm going to create here a new function right here. So I'm going to create here a command and say get data from MySQL database. So to get the data, I'm going to create a function here and name this function get data. In this function, I will first create SQL query. So I'll just create here SQL variable and store the SQL query here. So I'll just say here select star from books. Using this statement, I'm going to get all my fields value. Now to execute this statement, you know that we have MySQLi query function. So I'm going to just say here MySQLi query and first specify the global connection variable. So I will just say here globals, and in the single quote I will call the connection and then specify this SQL query. Now this SQL query return a result. So I'm going to store this result in the result variable because this function going to return a statement. So this statement is stored in these variables. Just after that, here I will just say if MySQLi number of rows. So I will call this MySQLi number of rows function. So this function return the number of rows in the result set and just specify result as an argument. And here I will just say if the result is greater than 0, then I will just say here while and just call row is equal to MySQLi fetch associative array. So I'm going to fetch this result as associative array, right? And then specify result as an argument. Now I want to print this data, so I'm going to just say here echo, and in the double quote I will just say ID, and I want to print this data, so I will just say row, and in the single quote I will just say ID, right? Because the name of my first field is ID, right? I'm going to just concatenate this string with this dot and this double quote and just say here book name and just concatenate with this database value. So I'll just say row and just call here book name, right? Save the changes. Now just after that, I'm going to just call this function when I click on this read button, right? So I'm going to just say here if is set, just call this post here, and in the bracket I will just say read here, right? So when I click on this button, I want to call get data function. Save the changes and click on this button. I'm going to get this data right here, right? So you have this data using this echo statement. Now I want to print this data in this table. So instead of specifying these hard-coded values, I'm going to specify this data in this table. So I'm going to just get rid of this echo statement from this function and just return result, right? Like this. And just after that, I will just get rid of this if block of this read button and specify that in index.php file right here. Instead of specifying this table row and this demo data, I will just get rid of this demo data and call the PHP script here. And first call here if statement with is said read button, right? And just after that, you know that this get data function return a result. So I'm going to get this result in the variable. So I'll just create here a variable result and store this return data in this variable. We have this database result in this variable. So I'm going to call here if we have result, then in the if statement I'm going to say while row is equal to and just call MySQLi fetch result, right? And then specify curly braces. And here what I'm going to do is I'm not going to just echo anything. Instead I'm going to just end this PHP script and start a new script from here, right? And here I'm going to create here table row, and in this table row I will just create table data, in this table data text, I will call the PHP script like this and just say here echo call the row this variable and specify here in the bracket ID and just end the statement, right? Just after that, I'm going to copy this statement, paste it here and just get rid of this ID and just say book name, copy and paste it again, change this ID to book publisher and change this ID to book price. Save the changes, and when you reload your application, now when you click on this read button, you are going to get these values right here. If I click on this read button, you can see you have these values in this table. So we have this book 1, book 2, publisher 1 and publisher 2 with the book price, right? It's very simple. Now we know that how to create and read data from the database, right? Now let's see how to update this data. Now just after that, let's see how to update this data. So what we are going to do is I'm going to just add here an icon. So when we click on this icon, I will display all these database records in these text boxes. So when I click on this first text box edit icon, I will display this first record in these text boxes. Let me show you what we are going to do. So I'm going to just create here new table data and call the I tag here and specify class fastfa edit and specify btn edit class here, right? Save the changes, and when you reload your page, you're going to get this edit icon, right? So now when I click on this edit icon, I want to display this first row data in these text boxes. So I'm going to get the help from JavaScript to do this work, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create here a new file of JavaScript and name this file main.js. I'm going to first include this file in index.php. So right here, I'm going to create here a script, and in the source attribute of this script, I will specify CRUD PHP and main.js file. Save the changes, and in main.js file, now in this main.js file, I'm going to create event on these icons. I'm going to just call $sign to call the jQuery object, and in the double quote, I will just call btn edit class to select these icons, right? And just create here click event. On this click event, I'm going to specify a function. So I'm going to call arrow function here, right? Now in this function, I will first say console.log and just print a message icon clicked, right? Save the changes, and on the console right here, you can see a message when I click on this icon. Now just after that, get rid of this console message. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to create here a function and name this function display data and specify event as a parameter. Now I will just create here a new variable. So I will just say let id is equal to 0. So I will just specify the default value to this id. Then I will call constant table data is equal to and just select this table data HTML tags. So I'm going to just say here using the $sign using the jQuery, I'm going to just select this table data. So I'm going to just call the tbody id table row and select this table data. Now we know that we have this table data in this td variable. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create here an array and create an empty array here, and just after that I just create here for upload. So I will just say for and just say here constant value of td and just print this td on the console like this. If I just say here console.log and specify this value, and when I call this function right here display data like this, if I reload the application and click on this icon, you're going to get this td table data on the console, right? Now we know that you have this table data in this value variable. I will just open my index.php file, and to this table data I'm going to specify data attribute to this table data. So I will just say here data id is equal to and just call a PHP script here. So I'll just say here PHP right? Now what I'm going to do is I will just call this echo statement right here to identify this table data using this ID. So I will just call this echo row ID, right? I will do the same for all this table data like this. If I just copy this statement and specify this to this table data, to this table data, and to this table data, right? Save the changes. When you reload your application, you can see, right? So you can see we have this data attribute to this table data. Now let's say if I want to grab second record values in these text boxes, then I will just say if the table data has table data ID 2, I want these values. So this will return all these values. Let me show you what we are going to do. Now in main.js file right here, I will just get rid of this console.log, and if I just say here if value.dataset.id, so you can access this dataset ID using dataset.id property, right? Is equal to true. I want to print all this data on the console. So if I just say here console.log and specify value here, I'm going to get the second record on the console like this. If I just reload this application and click on this edit button, I'm going to get this second database record on the console. And if I want to get the first database record, I will just change this 2 to 1. When I reload it, if I click on this icon, I'm going to get this first data record, right? Now, instead of specifying this hard-coded value here, I will just call here event parameter dot target dot dataset dot id. So this statement will return the ID of this icon. So this statement will check if the ID of this icon is equal to this dataset ID, then this will going to return this specific record like this. If I just print this ID, if I just say here console.log, and if I just say here e.target.dataset.id, and if I reload the application and when I click on this first edit button, I'm going to get here, oops, I need to specify here before I call this function. So I will just specify here e and save the changes, and when I reload it, and now when you click on this edit icon, you are going to get nothing because we specify this data attribute to this table data tag, and we are accessing this table data ID of this icon. So I'm going to just get rid of this statement and specify it to this icon right here. Save the changes, and if I reload the application and click on this edit button, I'm going to get this value. So when I click on this first ID, I'm going to get 1 here with this database record. When I click on this second record, I'm going to get 2 here with this second values, right? So in the main.js file, I will just get rid of this console, and instead of printing all these values on the console, I'm going to store that in the array, in this array, right? So I will just say here text value and in the array and specify ID here, and I'm going to increase this value by 1 and just specify value dot text content, right? So I'm going to store these values, this text content in this array and just return it. So I'm going to just say here return text values. Now you know that this function is returning an array, so I'm going to just get this array right here. So I'll just say here let text values is equal to, and just get this array in this variable and just print it like this. So if I just say here console.log and print these values, you're going to get array of data, right? So you have 1, book 1, publisher 1, and the value of the first record. If I click on the second record, you're going to get an array of a second record like this, right? Now I will just get rid of this console and just specify these values in these text boxes. So I need to first select these text boxes. So using jQuery, I'm going to just select these text boxes. So I'll just say here input, and I'm going to select all these text boxes using name attribute. So I'll just say here name, specify asterisk here, and right here I'm going to say book ID, right? So I'm going to access this text box using name attribute, right? I'm going to store this text box in the variable, so I will just select ID, copy the statement, paste it here, change this variable to book name, and just change this ID to name. Copy the statement, paste it right here, change this variable to book publisher, and this name became book publisher. Paste it again, change this variable to book price, change this name to book price. Now to specify value to these text boxes, using jQuery you can use value method like this. Now if I just call here like this id.val, I can specify value to the text box, right? Now if I just call here val, and if I just say here 2 and reload the application, and when I click on this icon, you're going to get 2 in this text box like this, right? So using val method you can specify value to any text box using jQuery, right? So I'm going to just specify here text values 0, right? So I want to specify the first index of array to this text box. Then I will say book name dot val, and I want to specify text values of 1. Then I will say book publisher dot val. I will say book values 2, book price dot val, text values 3. So here we are going to specify this array one by one to these text boxes. Save the changes, reload this application again. When I click on this icon, you are going to get these values in these text boxes like this, right? So now you can update these values by clicking on this button easily. So let's see how to update these values. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open my operation.php file. I'm going to get this data and update that data in the database like this. If I just create here a function and call this function update data, and if I just specify a comment here update data and call this function on click event of this button like this, if I just create here if is set, call this post and just call update button here and just say here update data. So if I just call this function on this button click event, I can update this data like this. Now to update this data, you need to first get these values in the variable. So I'm going to get these values. I will just say here book ID is equal to, and just call text box value function and just say here book ID. So this statement is going to return the value of this text box, right? Now just after that I will just say book name is equal to text box value and just say here book name. Then I will create a new variable book publisher and just say text box value and just specify book publisher, and the last I will create a new variable book price and just call text value and just call here book price. So now we have these text box values in these variables. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just call here, and now I will just say here if the book name, the book publisher and the book price, if we have data in these variables, I'm going to just execute this if block or just execute this else block, right? In this if block I'm going to create SQL statement. So I'll just create here a variable SQL and just call here SQL statement like this. If I just say here update books, so I'm going to just specify the name of my table, and then I will say set book name is equal to, in the single quote I want to call this book name variable. So I will just say here book name, right? So I want to specify book name value to this book name field right? Now just after that, specify comma here and just say book publisher is equal to, in the single quote, I will just call book publisher, specify comma here and just say book price is equal to, in the single quote, I will just call book price, and just after that here I will just say where cost, where ID is equal to, and in the single quote the ID is going to be this variable book ID, right? So I'm going to pass this book ID variable here, right? Now I will just execute the statement. So I will just call here if MySQLi query, call the connection string. So I will just call here globals connection, and then the second argument is going to be the SQL statement. So I will just call SQL here. If the statement return true, I'm going to just call text node function, specify the class name which is success, specify the text data successfully updated. So we are going to call this text node function which we had created earlier, right? Now just after that, if we're not able to insert this data, I'm going to just specify here else statement and just paste this function again, change this class to error, and this message is going to be unable to update data, right? And in this else statement right here, I'm going to call this text node with the error message and specify here select data using edit icon, right? Save the changes, and when I reload this application and if I click on this edit button, I'm going to get this data in this text box like this, right? I want to change this book price, so I'm going to just change this. I'm going to just change this to 45, right? And if I click on this update button, this will update this value. You are going to get this message, data successfully updated. If you click on this read button, you can see you have this updated value. But now I want to specify $sign to this book price. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open the index.php file, and right here I'm going to just add here a dollar symbol like this, right? Don't forget to specify dot here to concatenate these values. Save the changes, and if you reload your application, you're going to get this dollar symbol right here. If I click on this icon, you're going to get this dollar symbol in this text box as well. I don't want this dollar symbol in this text box, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open my main.js file. To this text box values 3, I will just call here replace dollar to empty string, right? Save the changes and click on this icon. You're not going to get this dollar symbol right here, right? So it's easy to update this value now. Now let's say I want to update this second value. So I'm going to just click on this icon, and if I just change this 33 to 40, and I want to change this publisher to publisher 23, and if I click on this update button, you're going to get this message, data successfully updated. And when I click on this read button, you can see you have this publisher 23 40.99. Now we know that how to create, read and update data in the database. Now let's see how to delete this data using this delete button. So I'm going to show you two ways to delete this data, using manually and by pressing delete all button. So let me show you first how to delete this data manually. So if I just click on this edit button, I'm going to get these values in these text boxes. And now when I click on this delete button, I want to delete this particular record. So what I'm going to do is open my operation.php file, and right here I'm going to create a new function and name this function delete record, right? Now I'm going to call this function. So I will just say here if is set and just call the button, right? So I'm going to just say here post and specify the name of my button. So I'll just say here delete. So when I click on the delete button, I want to execute delete record function, right? Now in this delete record function, I'm going to first get the value of the first text box, this one. I'm going to get this ID first. So I will just create here a new variable book ID is equal to, and just call text value function which we had created earlier to get the value of the text box, and then specify here book ID, right? But now if you check this value returned from this text box is going to be a string, because the text box always return string. So I don't want to get the string, so I will just convert the string into integer. So I'm going to call this parenthesis here and say here integer, right? So this statement will convert the string value to integer and store it in this variable, right? So now if we have 2 here, this is going to be stored 2 here with the type integer, right? Just after that, I'm going to create here SQL query. So I'll just say here SQL, and I'm going to create here delete from books, right? So I will delete record from this books table, and now I will call where cost. So I will just say here where id is equal to, and then specify this variable. So I'm going to call here book id, right? I want to delete a record equal to this id. Now to execute this statement, we just need to say if MySQL query, call the connection variable. So I will just say global, call the connection here. Then in the second parameter, I'm going to pass the query, right? Now if this function return true, I'm going to just print a message. So I'm not going to echo anything. Instead, I will just call text node function, which we had created earlier. So the first parameter is going to be the class name. So I will just specify here success, and the message record deleted successfully, right? Now if this function is not able to delete this record, I'm going to print an error. So I will just say else here, and in the text node I will just specify the error class and the message unable to delete record, right? Save the changes and just execute your application. Now let's say I want to delete this second record. So I'm going to just select this second record using this edit button, and to delete this record you just need to click on this delete button. So when I click on this delete button, you're going to get a message here, record deleted successfully. And if you refresh your database and click on this read button, you can see here you have only one record. Now if I try to insert a new record and name this book 3, publisher 3, and the price is going to be 54 point, and if I create a new record and when I refresh the database, you have third record here, right? So as you can see, the second record is deleted. Now let's say you have more than 10 records in your database and you want to delete all of them. In that situation, this technique is not usable. So I'm going to create here a new button to delete all the records in my database. Now what I'm going to do is, if I have more than 3 records, I'm going to create here a button and name this button delete all. And if I have less than 3 records, I don't want to create this button because I can manually delete all the records one by one. So I'm going to just create here a function in this operation.php file. Now to create this button, I'm going to create a function because I want to add condition in that function. So I'm going to create here a function and just say here delete btn. So this is the name of my function, and I'm going to use this function to create a button. I'm going to first call getData function. So this getData function return the result of the dataset. So in the result variable, you have the dataset values, right? Now just after that, what I'm going to do is I will just say here if we have values in this result, I will just say while row is equal to MySQL fetch associative array and just specify result here. So this function will return associative array to this row, and if you have this array in this row variable, I'm going to get the ID from this result. So here if I just say echo and just say row ID, then I have here ID in this variable. So I have here 3 in this variable, and now if I execute this function, I'm going to get 3 on this document, right? So what I'm going to do is I will just get rid of this echo statement and create here a new variable I and specify value to it. So I'll just specify 0, the default value, and if I just say here I plus plus, so this will increase the value of the I by 1, and just say here if the I is greater than 3. Now here I'm checking that if the table records is greater than 3, then I want to create a new button here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just say here button element. I will call the button element function and then first specify the button ID. So I'm going to just specify here btn delete all, right? Then I will just specify here the class name. Then I will specify the classes. So I will just say here btn danger, and then I want to specify the text. So I'm not going to add any text here. Instead, I'm going to add an icon here. So I will just add here icon and specify a class to add icon here and just say here fast fa trash, right? And just after that, I want to add here a text delete all, right? Now just after that, specify comma here and specify the last argument. So I'm going to just specify here the name of my button. So I'm going to say here delete all, right? And just after that, I'm going to specify the attribute. I will leave this attribute as it is. So I will just specify the double quote here, right? And just after that, I will just say here return to exit from this function. Save the changes. And now just after that, when we have this function, I'm going to just open the index.php file and write up here, just after this last button, I'm going to call a PHP script and just call this function delete btn, right? Save the changes, and when I execute it, something is going wrong. I need to inspect that. Yeah, here I forgot to specify $ here. Save the changes, and when you execute it, you can see when I have more than 3 records, if I just create here one more record, name this book 4, publisher 4, and the price is 22.98. If I create here a new record, and if I just create one more record here, and if I just say here book 5, publisher 5, and the price is 55, so I'm going to just create a new record here. Then you can see we have this new button here, but as you can see here we have undefined constant delete all. So as you can see here, oops, I need to specify double quote here. Save the changes, and when you execute it, you can see you have this delete all button as well. Now just after that, I'm going to just remove this margin and this padding from this button. So I'm going to just open the style.css file, and right here for this button, I'm going to just specify margin 1.5 em and 0.5 em, and the padding is going to be 0.3 em and 1.4 em, right? Save the changes, and when you execute it, you have your buttons, right? Now I inserted a few values in my database. So if I click on this read button, I'm going to get these 10 values. If I want to delete these duplicate values, then I can click on this edit button, and when I click on this delete button, this value is deleted. So you can see here we have record deleted successfully message, and if I click on this reload, you can see the 7th ID is deleted. Let's say if I want to delete all this record at once. So when I click on this delete all button, I want to delete all these records. Now what I want to delete all this record. Now if you try to manually select this record and delete it, you are investing your lot of time. Instead of investing your time, I'm going to create here a delete all button. I'm going to create a function on this delete all button. So when you click on this delete all button, I want to delete all these records. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open my operation.php file, and right here I'm going to create here a new function and name this function delete all, right? In this function, I'm going to first create SQL query. So I'll just say here SQL is equal to, and in the double quote, I'm going to just say drop table, and I want to drop the table books, right? And to execute this query, I will just say if my SQLi query and just execute it with the connection. So I'm going to just call global connection and just specify the SQL parameter here. Now once we have this parameter, I'm going to just say here text node, then specify the class name, which is success, and the value of this text is all record deleted successfully. And just after that, in the else statement, I'm going to say text node, specify class error, and the message is going to be something went wrong, record cannot deleted. Right, save the changes, and now just after that, just create here if is set, specify the post, and just call the name of your delete all button. So I'm going to just say here delete all, and in this if statement I'm going to call delete all function. Right, save the changes, and when I click on this delete all button, this will delete all these records. Let me show you. If I click on this delete all button, you're going to get this message, all record deleted successfully. But now you can see here you have this warning. So to solve this problem, what I'm going to do is, when we delete all the record, I'm going to just create a new table once we delete all the record. So I'm going to just call createDB function here. Save the changes, and when you reload your application, the warning is gone. Now if you click on this read button, you're going to get nothing because you don't have anything. Now let me insert a new value. So I'm going to say here book 1, publisher 1, and the price is going to be 76.99. and just insert this value in the database. Let me show you. Right, insert the next value. So I'm going to just click on this edit button, change this book to 2, publisher 2, and the value is 16.99. If I click on this create button, I have my second value here. Right, but as you can see, you don't have this delete all button yet. So if I just create my third value like this, 3, publisher 3, and the value is going to be something like this, you're not going to get this delete all button. But if you create one more record in this table, you're going to get this button right here. If I click on this create button, you can see you have this delete all button because you have more than 3 records. Right, now to delete these all records, just click on this delete all button. When I click on this delete all button, all records is successfully deleted and you don't have any data in your table right now. Now the last thing we need to do is, I want to specify the read only property to this text box and also want to specify the value for this text box. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just open my main.js file. I will just cut this ID statement, this one, paste it outside of this function. So what I want to do is, I just want to specify read only property to this ID. So user cannot change this value because the ID value is unique. So that is why we are going to just specify read only property to this ID. So I'm going to just say here ID attribute. So I'm going to just call the attribute method of jQuery and just specify read only, and the value is going to be read only. Right, so when you execute it, you can see the ID text box is now read only. So now you can't change the value of this ID. Now I want to specify the ID in this text box. So let's say if I have 2 records in my database, I want to display here 3 because we are going to insert the third record. Right, so I want to specify here 3 if I have 2 records in my database. Now let's say if I just create here 2 records, so I'm going to just say here book 1, publisher 1, and the price. So this is my first record and this is my second record. Right, when I have 2 records in my database, I want to specify 3 here because we are going to insert our third value. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to just open my operation.php file. So I'm going to just create here a new function. So I'll just say function set ID. So I'm going to just create here a comment and just say here set ID to text box. Right, now in this function, I will just first get the ID from the get data function. So what I'm going to do is, I will just call here get ID is equal to get data. Right, so this get data function is going to return the result. So we know that we have this result in this get data ID variable. Now just after that, I'm going to create here a new variable called ID is equal to 0. So this is the default ID I want to specify when I don't have any record in my table. Just after that, here I will just say if I have anything in get data in get ID, I'm going to just call while loop here. So I'll just say while, call the row, and just say here MySQLi fetch associative array and just specify here get ID. Now when you have this array, you can get the ID. So to get this ID, just call this row, then call this ID using single quote like this, and store this ID in this ID variable. So I'm going to just call here ID, right? Now just after that, just after this if statement right here, I will just say return ID. Now if you return this ID, you are going to get 2 here because I have 2 records in the table. I want to return 3 because I have 2 records in my database table. So that is why I will just add here 1. I'm going to get 3 here because I want to insert my third value. Save the changes and call this function in index.php file right here to this book ID value, right? So I'm going to call here set ID. Save the changes. When you execute this application, you will get 3 here, right? Because you have 2 values in your database and you are going to insert your third value. Now if I just delete this value, this second value like this, you are going to get here 2 because you have 1 value in your database and you are going to insert your second value. So you know that how many records are there in your database and on which ID you are going to insert your next record, right? Now you know that how to create, read, update and delete data using PHP. It's very simple. So that's it. If you have any question, you can ask me anytime. Like this video if you find anything useful. Subscribe to this channel for more latest videos. That is all for now. I will see you in the next tutorial.